Hey, everybody. Welcome to EGFC Leads Week 6. If you've joined us in the past, you're hopefully familiar with all of our beautiful faces at this point. But if you're new, EGFC Leads is a weekly web series brought to you by the Electronic Gaming Federation, where we bring a bunch of really cool people from the schools that are part of EGFC, as well as a bunch of industry experts, and talk about a variety of topics. So far, we've talked about things like mental health, managing teams, how to get into broadcast production. And this week, we're talking about how to get into shoutcasting. So before I introduce our panelists, just as a quick FYI, there are now 4 weeks left of the sessions. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to build community on your campus or at your school. And then we'll also be talking about some really cool opportunities and topics around championships as we're starting to get into that. Speaking of championships, this upcoming weekend, starting Friday at 4:30, we have the Metro Atlantic Championships for Rocket League, Overwatch, and Super Smash Brothers. The week following, we run the Big East, and then we have another championship every weekend until we get to April 23rd. So if you're excited about Rocket League, Overwatch, Super Smash Brothers, or FIFA, be sure to check out our schedule on our website and be sure to tune in. So getting to the topic at hand, first, I would love to introduce our panels, who are all amazing shoutcasters. They're part of the EGF family overall. They've been working with us for quite a while, and I've had the distinct pleasure to see some of them go from their first broadcast into seasoned professionals. And I am a genuine fan of all of them. So I would love to, starting with Dara, give them all a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Dara. I'm a New York City Super Smash Bros. Ultimate commentator and streamer. I've been doing it for a number of years, and that's really the only game I talk about.
Thank you for being here. How about you, Dry?
Hello everyone, my name is Dryad and I do a lot of Overwatch casting. So similar to Dara, for me it's Overwatch the only thing that I talk about.
Thanks for being on. And Steidly.
What's up, guys? Winston Steidly, also known as Steidly24, and I've been in Overwatch production since the game came out in my memory. I also do some Valorant casting, as well as a lot of live work with the Houston Outlaws. So I've gotten some time to get some pretty good experience, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. And last but not least, Soy.
Hello, my name is Joe Soisson, aka Soy, and I mostly do Super Smash Brothers and Rocket League.
Thanks for being here. So the cool thing about all of this is all of us, I think, in one way or another, have worked together. So this is kind of a fun opportunity to hang out and talk about careers. And so the focus of today's panel for everybody that's watching is to really kind of get an idea of, if you're just starting out in shoutcasting, or if you've got a little bit of experience in it and you're trying to figure out how do you get to the same level of all these rock stars. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the behind the scenes stuff and what that means in their journey. So to give some context to that, the first thing that I'd love to start with is just kind of everybody's origin stories. So can you tell me, starting with Dara, a little bit about, what led you to think like, wow, I really want to talk about this game to people online, and kind of some of your career highlights so far?
Sure. So I started doing Smash commentary a couple of years back. I want to say about 2 years ago. I was a frequent competitor at my local events, right? So I would compete offline quite often. I had the opportunity to travel a couple of times. And then beforehand, actually, I had just recently stopped doing professional stand-up comedy for a number of years. I wanted to combine my desire to be in front of a microphone, in front of a camera, and to combine that with Smash, and I was able to go in and talk about it, and I really enjoyed doing it. Some of my career highlights, I got to cast a really big event a couple of years back, known as Return to Yoshi's Island. That was phenomenal. That was really huge for me. Overall, I just think the biggest highlight has just been, seeing an audience grow, seeing people recognize me over time. And I really started to pick up commentary, especially when pandemic hit, right? Because there was a huge shift from offline events, especially, which is majority of the case with fighting games, into online events. So definitely a little bit of a shift for me, but that has definitely been working out for me.
Beautiful. Excuse me. And how about you, Dryad?
Well, for me, so I've always been into Overwatch ever since it came out. I was so excited to play the game. I got super into the game, but I never really thought about casting. It was something that never really crossed my mind, and for me, it was something that kind of happened accidentally. I saw that I'm from Colombia, and I saw that Overwatch Colombia was going to do a tournament, and I was interested. I was like, yeah, I want to maybe do interviews and stuff because I do like public speaking. I just didn't consider casting, and I was like, yeah, maybe I can help them out. I like helping Overwatch, and I like helping my country on the esports team. So I was like, hey, I can do some interviews. I can talk to the players, and then maybe you can publish those interviews, whatever you want to do with it. And they were like, why don't you try casting? And I was like, I'm not really sure how that's gonna go for me, but I gave it a try. At the beginning, it was horrible. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was able to catch up really quickly. And it made me so excited because I was able to put my emotions that I had for the game into words. And it started to be in Spanish, and then I started moving into English. I was like, the biggest scene is going to be English. I watch everything in English. Might as well give it a try. So I've been doing this for about a year, and it's really something that caught me off guard and never really expected to end up here.
Thanks so much for sharing. How about you, Shadow?
Right when Overwatch came out, I actually had recently dropped out of college to come home for some personal reasons, and so I was just kind of sitting around with a bunch of extra time, and I had a decent computer set up, and I was browsing Reddit, and a small tournament called Plus League was looking for a production director, old PlayStation 4 league. And so I started doing a lot of broadcast production there, which also included me casting at the same time, which I don't recommend. And eventually, a couple of friends of mine over at Owlet Tournament contacted me, and they said, we've seen a couple of your tournaments, and we want you to come work with us. And so I was able to kind of build my craft and move from the console realm to PC there. And from there, it's just been, Elo Hell, BGG, all these great places that I was able to find to kind of boost myself. And then I moved into a different title just because I kind of want to diversify my portfolio a little bit. And as I've been casting Overwatch for 3 years, and yes, there's a lot more I have to learn, but for the most part, I feel like I have a pretty good hold on the game. But I guess key moments for me, I got to cast at PAX South for the Houston Outlaws, which was a really big deal for me. As you can tell, I'm probably a pretty big fan. But it was a really big deal for me to be able to actually be involved with the team. And then on top of that, I got to do trials, the trials contenders with Elo Hell for a little while, which was a lot of fun. And also I got to host my first event. I've never been a TO before, but I TO'd with Jag, a good friend of mine who's also a big player here at EGF, and we got to do a collegiate cup with WSU. That was just a bunch of fun workshop modes. But yeah, those are my highlights.
Beautiful. Appreciate you sharing that. And again, last but not least, Soy, tell us about your origin story and which college you came from, because you have to give a shout out to the hometown.
Yeah. So I'm from Portland, Oregon, which is way on the other side compared to the rest of the EGF. And but it really, my origin story kind of started in college when I was making my choice of where to go. I knew I wanted to get into sports broadcasting, like traditional sports broadcasting, and Canisius College in Buffalo, New York seemed like a good fit because they had a hands-on program where their home broadcasts would go to either ESPN3 or ESPN Plus. And so, when I went there, I got to be a part of numerous broadcasts for multiple sports: soccer, basketball, volleyball. It was a blast. And I kind of made the transition to esports when actually the first I really heard about the EGF was when Canisius had built brand new. They built an esports lab, and so they were joining this league, and I was going to do a report on it. And then I figured, well, I really like, Super Smash Brothers because I grew up playing that game, and Rocket League is probably my new favorite, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I figured, I've got this broadcasting knowledge. Why don't I give esports a try? And that's how I kind of got my start. And I started just a few months ago.
And look at you now doing all this crazy stuff, being on panels, doing championships and stuff. It's crazy. Well, thank you. So kind of in line with the origin story, something that I think is super important and something that, we try to have conversations with, especially newer broadcasters, is sort of about how you as a shoutcaster are your own brand. You have you're dealing with freelance, obviously, unless you're lucky enough to get, a full-time, long-time contract somewhere, which certainly is a rarity in the industry, as we've certainly been dealing with over the last couple of weeks and months. So can you talk about, from each of your personal experiences, one, even just how you came up with a handle that you use, and how both of that, as well as the consideration for how you present yourselves as you're thinking about even the gigs that you're a part of, how you're showing yourself on Twitter and social media and things like that. And I know there's a lot to that question, so we can break it down a little bit further. But just to give a start, can you tell me how you think about your personal branding and ultimately how that plays into your shoutcasting? Starting with, I know that was a very deep question, so whoever wants to go first on that one.
I'll take that one. So as you can see, I have my own actual brand with these hoods that I wear that are, I'm having multiple ones made, but I have one specifically for when I do events with the Outlaws team. And then I have this one, which I usually wear when I'm casting. And that was just because the first time that I went down to Overwatch League at the Blizzard Arena, I had this Appa beanie, and somebody was there that I had cast in a PlayStation 4 league, and they recognized the beanie and decided to make me a logo based on the beanie. And then a friend of theirs sent me this hood, which they custom made for me. And ever since then, it's been a part of my brand. You'll see it in all of my casts. And that's the biggest point there, is the brand unity for me. You'll find me across all platforms on the exact same name. So if you Google Steidly24, you get everything about me. And as far as holding myself on camera and on casts, I find myself, and I've been told I'm kind of a host caster in a way of, I like to frame up my other caster to be able to be frank, I suck at conversations. So for me, it's really important that I kind of bring a different element to the cast, because that's what a lot of people come to. It was shoutcasting is those two people conversing about the game and kind of making it interesting. And I lack there. So what I'm able to do is kind of host up people like Dryad, who know a lot more about the game than I do, and kind of allow them to shine a little bit and create synergy there. So when I'm casting, I like to share the spotlight as much as possible, just because I feel like it makes a more dynamic and more fun experience for the viewer.
That's a very good point. And what is the story behind your name?
So my last name, Steidly, comes from the German root Steidl, which is just take the Y off of the last name. But when I was young, my cousin who told me this had a lisp, and so they pronounced the last name Steidl. And thus, when I typed in my gamer tag, it became Steidl. And I have had multiple people from Germany be like, that is not anywhere near how that would sound. And I was like, I know, but I'm with it and I love it. So that's where that came from. And honestly, I have been racking my brain about this, but I have no idea why or how I chose 24. So I guess that's just in there.
Yeah, I mean, names don't have to make sense all the time, but that's a quite lovely story. Dara, how about you? Tell me about how you think about branding in your name.
Oh man. When it comes to general branding, I think, man, that's like such a big question. I'm still like kind of racking my brain trying to figure that out. If we're talking a little bit more about like commentary style, I know Steidl talked on that just a little bit. I really like to offer like good analytical commentary. I think I'm able to like talk about the game in ways that other people might sometimes not really approach. I also tend to be extremely cringe on the microphone, in such a way that is comforting and endearing. I hope. I hope. But yeah, if there is a way to define my brand or sum it up in a few words, I guess that would probably have to be it. I always just try to like bring like a sort of, I don't know. I think a lot of my brand is also like tied in with who I am, like myself. I try to bring in, you know, a lot of energy, like a lot of like bubbly personality into it, right? Because that is how I manifest like a lot of my emotions through this game, right? And then also, if we're talking about the origins of my tag, I was playing World of Warcraft in the 4th grade, and I thought to myself, man, I really want a cool tag. I need something awesome. So I got a subscription for 2 months. I spent a whole week thinking about a tag, and I just settled on Daramgar.
Simple and easy. I, as someone who has gone through several tags over my lifetime, because when I was younger, did not have the, we'll say, I'm gonna say
Foresight?
partially luck, foresight, definitely, to be like, yeah, someday this might be important and people might know me by this thing, and I definitely should not make it this super cringe thing that definitely came from an 8-year-old. You know, shout out to AOL Instant Messenger. Just get how gross that was at the time.
Stop dating us.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh well, you're right. You're right. Dry. Tell me about your approach to branding and your name.
Well, I started not really having any idea. So when I used to play on my PlayStation or any console, I would just put like my name and a bunch of numbers or like my birthday or something. And then I was like, I don't even like my name. I'm gonna be honest. That's why you never see Daniela because I hate it. So I was like, I'm gonna come up with something else, and I was looking at kind of things that I liked, and it was really just sitting in a computer. I remember being at I think I'm like in class. We weren't really doing anything, and I started looking at things that I like, and I really like the idea of a kind of forests of nature and stuff like that. And I looked up sort of like fantasy creatures or like Greek mythology, things like that had something to do with nature and forests and stuff like that. And I found dryads that are like little nymph forest creatures that protect oak trees, and I thought that was really cool. I really liked the way they sounded. It was short and it was simple, and it's not really hard to say. And I just decided to stay with it. I really like it. I think out of all the other options that I saw, is kind of the best one, and I'm really, really glad I decided to stay with it.
That's a very cool story. I feel like simple and clean is the way to go. I do appreciate about that, about all of you. None of you have overly complex names that I need to shorten, which is always nice. Going over to you, Soy. Something that's super interesting about you is you're talking about, and to Michelle's question in the chat, you talked a little bit about how your initial thought was getting into traditional sports broadcasting. So as you were kind of going through the process of thinking about your name, your branding, the difference between the two, did something come to you as, or did you put a different consideration into that, or was it really all kind of centered about how you ended up with in esports?
No, well, in terms of the tag, it just kind of rolled with my name. My last name being Soisson, it just Soy fell out. You know, it's like, come on. But yeah, so the nickname was always Soy Sauce, or the in-game tag was Soy Source, and I was just like, yeah, just go with the median. But in terms of like branding style, you know, I think I sort of view the way I was taught how to broadcast. I sort of split it into two ways, depending on if I'm color or play-by-play, because that's just always been my mindset. And if I'm doing color analysis, I tend to be very analytical and like kind of in the moment, where it's like, this play happened because X, Y, and Z, and then I tend to, I think, try and, or at least I try and kind of paint the broader picture, because the question that's always in the back of my mind is like, how does X team win a championship? Because that's always the goal at the end of the day in my mind, is like, how do you win a championship? So I try and always like incorporate that question somehow, through via standings, via schedule, via tournament seeding, something like that. And I guess those are kind of like the two styles I implement for depending on if I'm color or play-by-play.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of that, that's actually a great transition into another question. So when you think about traditional shoutcasting, there are kind of there's a variety of ways you can do that. Some people get forced into solo casting, which I know is a nightmare. So we try to avoid that the best we can. Your traditional setup's going to be, one play-by-play and one color. Sometimes, especially if you're going back, to the origins in Korea, you're going to try to do like a triple shoutcast, which is a fascinating experience that can either be really amazing or really terrible. It depends on the day. But if we focus on that traditional setup, you, Joe, as you mentioned, there's the color, which is obviously talking more about, the analytical side of it, the stories of the players, about the teams, trying to help and understand the context around what's happening. And then your play-by-play is obviously, dealing with the play-by-play, what's happening in real time, adding emotion to those moments and being able to show, here's some crazy stuff going on. And this is why I'm yelling in my room or studio at, 1 a.m. in the morning. So as we kind of think about your choices in your career, and Joe, we'll start with you. Can you talk about, you and Steidly are kind of unique in the sense that you do both and you can transition between the two roles depending on the day and certainly what we need from you on the schedule side.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk a little bit about your thought process going into the role you wanted to focus on, or specifically for the two of you, how you ended up doing both and what the difference between specializing and being able to do both was? And we'll start with you, Joe.
Let's see. I think the best way I can kind of go about that answer is when I started doing traditional stuff, I did not jump right into being a commentator. My first couple of jobs on those student-run broadcasts were camera work. I was either the overhead camera operator or the sideline operator. And so eventually when I got to commentate soccer, it was like I'd already kind of established like, all right, this is how the production works. This is how, the game kind of flows. This is how this team kind of plays, because it was only for home games. And so I think when it came time to do, commentary, the other thing that really helped was just background research. One of the points that I kind of keep in the back of my head was, you can do all the research in the world, but you only ever use 2% of it, because you never know what's going to be important on the day that the game happens. And so if you cover everything, or if you have all your notes, then at least you're not unprepared, right? And then you can kind of elaborate on whatever point happens. And I think that was really the two things that kind of helped me transition smoothly into commentary.
Makes sense to me. And Steidly, you being the other person that is, on one side of the mic or the other, I guess, depending, and that's the wrong analogy. We'll say either color or
I do
play-by.
observing in production as well.
That's also true. Well, tell me a little bit about, sort of as you were thinking about, everything that you talked about in your origin story, certainly where you are right now. Again, you're kind of unique in the sense that, while you've done behind the camera and in front of the camera, you also do color and play-by-play depending on the day. So you can tell me a little bit about the process in coming to the choice and the ability to do both?
Yeah. So color casting for me is something that I've taken up rather recently. Within the past 3 or 4 months, I've been doing a little bit of work into that. And part of the reasoning for that, I'll get into about when I talk about play-by-play. But for play-by-play for me, I used to do, I read a lot. I would do speed reading, and I've done, a lot of teleprompter work in live events. So when I began to get involved into the esports realm that is Overwatch, the first thing that I noticed is that there's so much happening. when you watch a game of Overwatch and the big team fights break out, there are just so many different things happening on your screen, and for a viewer, that's a lot to take in. And as somebody who's, to toot my own horn, pretty adept at pulling information and being able to kind of understand what exactly is happening, it allowed me to be able to come into that play-by-play role where I can very quickly, on the fly, look at the situation, dumb it down, and summarize it and put it into a form that is kind of palatable to the viewer in a way that's interesting and not just thanks for telling me what just happened on the screen. Because that's what a lot of people think that play-by-play is. You're just recounting it. But what play-by-play is to me is the story writer. It's the one that gets to look at what's happening in the game, and you're the one that gets to make what the viewer sees. Because they may be seeing the same thing as you, but the way that you phrase it, how you hype the fight, what things you point out, all of that jazz really targets where the imagination goes for the viewer. And for me, that was a really fun thing to do and an easy thing for me to do in a sense of I already had that skill set coming into it with previous work. So the play-by-play was more of a natural transition for me. And the color portion was after 3 years of casting the game, I know so much more. So I can go into why did this push work? Why didn't this push work? Why did they rotate to the left and not to the right? You know, why is it that they're playing a Mei and not a McCree? And things like that, where previously, if we're being frank, I was too dumb about the game to really get into in a way that would help a viewer. Because a lot of the people that watch these esports, it's from what I've noticed, it's a big divide of like people that really enjoy the game and a lot of people that are really good at the game and are watching these competitions to get better. So I couldn't bring anything to that second half of the spectrum for a long time just because I didn't have the knowledge about the game. And then transitioning to color later, once I built that knowledge and made myself comfortable as play-by-play and got kind of the flow of how the casting was going, it became a little bit easier. But the play-by-play for me was kind of a natural transition. The color has been a lot more forced. I've had to do a lot more research and preparation, and I find myself, you know, sticking to the books a little bit more when it comes to color.
Yeah, that makes entirely, an incredible amount of sense. And I know the amount of work that goes in, especially when we're doing prep, is no small feat. So I appreciate that about all of you. And going into other color casters, both for Dryad and for Dara, we tend to put you guys on color. So can you talk a little bit about what led you to the choice to focus specifically on that area and what kind of goes into your preparation for a broadcast?
Yeah. For me, so it's interesting because, again, like I didn't really expect to get into casting, and when I did, I started thinking, so how can I be the best caster, that I can be myself? And I thought about the casters that I really enjoy listening to, and are those that are very excited. They're like almost screaming, and they make you, if you're looking away for a second, and they make you look and see what's going on in the game because it's so interesting, and because they're yelling, they're pretty much telling you to look. And I wanted to do that, and naturally you would think, well, if it's that sort of emotion, I would go more into doing play-by-play. But that wasn't really my case when I started out, and because I was very nervous and because I didn't really plan on casting, they were like, just try to do color first, just because it's a little bit more calm and you don't have to think in the moment as much. So if you're at the beginning struggling to come up with words and stuff, with color, you have more time, you can talk more slowly. So I started doing that, and I started enjoying it. And I actually did go into a little bit more of play-by-play at some point. When I got to the point and I was comfortable with my color casting, I was like, I want to do these exciting parts more. And I started doing that in Spanish a lot. But when I started doing English and I got the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who were trying to support me making that transition, I was asking them, like, hey, I really like the exciting parts. I really like doing play-by-play, but I'm not sure how I'm going to do in English just because I'm not used to it. And they talked to me. They were like, here's the options. When you do this, you can do. And they gave me, it was a pair of casters, and they were talking to me. It was Dora and Moxie, and they were saying like, hey, look, I'm the color caster. You should go with this type because we do this and this and this so much better. And then there was Dora saying like, oh, but I get to do this and this. So I was thinking about it for a long time, and I decided to start with color just because it was kind of more comfortable, and it was what I started with. And then I got to be more analytical and more sort of getting more knowledge as I started casting. But I think play by play is something that it's something that I still want to do. It's something that I still do in Spanish once in a while. And there's this community tournament that I really enjoy. Casting is more of a not so professional, but something that I'm really into. It's called Bad Patch Premier League, and then there I get to do a little bit more play by play. And the reason why I like it is because I get to learn a little bit more about myself, and because I get to support people who are casting for the first time. So I'm like, they're nervous because maybe I have more experience, and I'm like, don't worry, like I don't even know what I'm doing in play by play. You get to do color, and then we get to like try it out, and I get to support them doing like that first time. That is always so nerve wracking. But in that professional environment, I always do color just because it's something that I have the most knowledge on it, because I got to get it to a point where I'm really happy with it.
Very good points all around, and I'm certain that all of the new people always appreciate the support, as we've seen that spectrum play out quite a few times. And even I get nervous, and my job isn't even being on the mic. It's just like, man, I hope we're setting everyone up to succeed. Fingers crossed. And you all have risen to the occasion in such extraordinary ways, so I appreciate that. But Dara, tell me about your choices.
Sure. So I mean, I would define myself, as a color caster, just because like I really do like talking about the analytical side. I really like the numbers about the game. I think there's a lot of unexplored discussion when it comes to certain game mechanics, really helping to break down why things happen. But I'm not sure if this is necessarily applicable to other esports, because my experience solely lies within the realm of Smash. But I don't think I would challenge the notion that casters can fall into like one of these two categories. I think it is by branding yourself or defining yourself as that can definitely make it a little bit easier for like producers to decide who to pair with who together. But I think in Smash, what's especially valued is being dynamic enough to really be able to work with a lot of different kinds of people. And so there are definitely times when I don't think you can define either of the casters that are working together in that moment as either exclusively color, exclusively play by play. It's just like sort of about the conversation that they're having between themselves. What kind of a relationship are they building on a microphone? What's their specific dynamic, and is it interesting to the viewer? So I think that's like a little bit more interesting of like a way like to explore, to think about it in the context of Smash. There aren't usually like a lot of like slow moments where you would have enough time to really talk too much about like how did the players get to this point, where did they go, because these are players in a grassroots scene. It's still very much so small world. You get to see like a lot of the same people both on the mic and both on screen who's playing. So to avoid kind of like that redundancy, I would argue that like color casting and play by play, although present, I don't think the roles are as sharply defined as they would be in some other titles.
Yeah, I definitely get that impression, just, as the viewer and consumer of that. You're right that especially on the production side, it is way easier for us to look at two people and say, okay, these are the categories you fit into. This is the chemistry that we're looking for on camera. These are the comfort levels that we see, and being able to know if you especially are coming into this for the first time, having some definition to your role helps you not, stumble over each other and ultimately create a better experience. Yeah. But I do think especially, in Smash, but other games as well, once you start to get to a certain
big like that.
Yeah, exactly. The more comfort that you have with your casters or your co-casters, the stronger your knowledge about the game, the easier it is to kind of use those as more like benchmarks than anything else. So that's a great point. If we take a step back from the theory and philosophy of the game a little bit and put yourselves in the shoes of someone who's listening to this and maybe thinking, this shoutcasting thing sounds super interesting and I would love to get involved in that. One of the things that I don't see talked about a lot is the equipment that you get into. Ooh. So last week we talked about on the production side. Yes, there are so many options. On the production side, we were talking about, like switches and like $500,000 machines once you're outfitting stuff in the more traditional broadcast way and all that kind of stuff. And as someone who myself just went through the arduous process of understanding, like, this is a microphone, this is a microphone boom arm, and this is why you get one over the other. Can you tell me just in a short, concise way what the equipment that you currently use is and why, and what's been the most important upgrades if you've made them over the last, I don't know, the point of your career, we'll say, starting with you, Dryad.
Yeah, so to start out, I think you need like a decent microphone. I'm gonna be honest, and a decent camera. I think for the low opportunities that you get at the beginning when you're starting out, sometimes you don't even have to use a camera, and people understand that you don't have a lot of experience, you don't have any experience maybe, so you can get away with that. But then the thing is considering how far do you want to get, how serious do you want to take casting, and that's when you consider how much you want to invest. I recently, my biggest investment was upgrading my microphone. I had like an okay microphone, but it didn't really make me happy. And when I was trying to improve, one of the first things that I did was after every single cast, I would run to producers and I would run to the people that were in charge of the event and asking how I did, how they heard my sound, and how I could improve. And besides the obvious, you should do this casting thing different, they were like, you should maybe improve and try to invest in a good microphone. And that's what he did. I invested in a Shure microphone. It's kind of the standard for casting in Overwatch. When I was asking, especially, everyone was like, just get this. It's so good. And I definitely noticed the difference after. And the comments that people would tell me about how my microphone sounded weird. Sometimes it went away. But again, it's just like, how serious do you want to take casting, and how much are you willing to invest? Because there are other good microphones, but I didn't want to get kind of a mid-tier microphone, knowing that I was going to probably want to improve and get a better one at some point. So I got the one that was the standard, and now I'm definitely looking forward to maybe improving my camera. I saw some casters, if you look at contenders, obviously Overwatch League, that have really, really good cameras. So maybe that's something that I'm looking forward to do as well.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I think the variety of microphones, settings, green screen or not green screen, all sorts of things that we see across all of our broadcasts are fascinating to me to understand those journeys. And speaking of journeys, Joe, when we started with you, we would say that your setup was... it was what Dryad just described as, who knows where we're going, let's start with something. So can you talk a little bit about that?
It was so okay. So the very first broadcast I did, I tried using my phone as my microphone, and the connection issues were on another level. That was something else. But and I think my webcam was also my laptop webcam, which by the way, I think that I'll just say that my current setup is a Blue Yeti microphone and a gaming computer that can run all the games that I want to cast, and just a normal webcam. There's nothing special about that, but I think to start my once I finally got like a better setup than my phone, it was my microphone used to be a lapel microphone clipped to a picture frame as like my stand-up like setup, rather than like a mic arm or anything. And it was a plug-in USB to this headset, so this doesn't actually ever do anything. It was like my stand-up microphone was here, and but I think your bare bones, if you want to get into casting, you just need something like a lapel mic, and then at least a computer that runs whatever game you're trying to cast, because that was the big problem for me too, was that my laptop was on the verge of dying, and I couldn't run Rocket League, so I was always asking the producers for screen shares, which connection issues can happen. But that was besides the point. I think bare minimum, you need something that can run the game that you want to cast, and a microphone, because some leagues don't even require a camera. That's the other thing. But,
Yeah.
but if you are going to use a camera, just anything will work. Most anything will work. At a bare bones.
Very good points. Yeah, I mean, the audio, I think, is one of the things that, like to Dryad's point earlier, is it's one of the most important aspects of any broadcast, because if it's such an unpleasant experience to listen to, then people will not want to watch it. I feel like screen setters, it's okay, but audio is...
My old audio made me sound like a radio villain. Like it was oh,
Yeah,
I looked back and I was like, how did you guys listen to this? I'm so sorry.
Had faith,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially because as a caster, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're selling your voice. You want people to hear your voice, so you want to make it the best that you can. So I think obviously microphone is going to be the biggest investment. And you definitely notice the difference. It's a lot of, at the beginning I was like, but I don't really know what you mean. Like, why do you want me to? I hear it fine. But after you get more experience and you start comparing your voice to other people's voices and how they sound, and you're like, you definitely feel the need to get that.
Yeah, very much so. And even outside of the equipment, Dara, something that I think has been a really cool evolution for you is we've gone from what was your dorm room to now, which is like a much more, we'll say, like broadcast friendly background.
Yes.
So can you tell a little bit about not just your equipment, but also how you came to the decision on your setup?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I must say, not having dirty clothes in my background, absolute game changing, man. I have been getting hired left and right now. So you just mean in general, like the decisions I made about the setup?
Yeah, like talk about the importance of that and why you went with the design you did.
Sure. This space, first and foremost, is not just a studio. This is a space for me. This is the space where I'm going to be spending 95% of my time. So I'm going to be filling it with things I like to look at, things that I like to do. I want to look at this wall and be like, damn, that looks excellent. I'm happy about that. The biggest thing is, like, I wanted this to be a pleasant work environment. I wanted to keep it as clean and efficient as possible, to the point where I don't feel overwhelmed before I go ahead and sit down on the mic. I want this to be as creative a space, as clean of a space, and as controlled of a space as possible, right, going into it. So I was just like able to put up like plushies and games that I like. I was able to paint my own wall red. I set up some acoustic panels in the colors red and black. Not sure if you guys knew I like those colors, but there you go. And then if we're just talking sheer equipment wise, what I think is, like, again, the most important thing to have if we're talking about in-home commentary, right? Building your own studio. One of the beauties, by the way, of the fighting game community is that you're able to go to physical in-person tournaments. They usually have everything set up for you. All you got to say is, hey, can I jump on? But if we're talking about casting from home, man, I gotta say, having a microphone on them has been such a huge quality of life improvement.
Oh, yeah.
It's going from like the default Blue Yeti stand to a microphone on them. Oh, night and day, you know? But then also, people don't talk about this enough. It's like, you can invest in other things before you outright buy a new microphone. You can put more things into your room. You can put up some more acoustic panels, just to improve the audio quality as much as possible, because people don't exactly like realize like how far you can take the tools that you have with just some clever workarounds, and being able to and just like being able to compensate and really maximize that, because you could have the most expensive mic in the world, but then your acoustics might not necessarily be up to par. You're kind of hitting a ceiling prematurely, you know? So just something really, really good to be mindful of that. But the biggest thing that I'll emphasize is make your space like something you want to be in. You know, if you want to be in this space, if you feel comfortable in it, you know, get a humidifier, you know, like make it cozy for yourself. Make sure you have everything that you need.
Some mood lighting.
In fact, the gamer LEDs, oh my gosh.
RGB
oh my
for
gosh.
life.
The RGB lighting. Because we can't be subtle. We just have to be obnoxious about our favorite colors.
Right.
You know, little gamer fridge, you know, like that's a nice addition as well. Make this a space that you want to be in. Make this a space that you feel comfortable sitting down and be like, yeah, I'm going to go and talk about video games for 8 hours. So that's like the biggest advice I have on that. Just make it, you know, make it somewhere you want to be in.
Very good points, especially in the current circumstances. The more time we spend at our desks and in our places, the harder it is to be like, wow, this is amazing. So anything is helpful there. Steidly, for you, my man, anything that you would add to the other points that have been made so far?
I want to reinforce a brand that's already been said multiple times, Blue. This is my beginning microphone. It's the Snowball. The Yeti is also a really good option.
Classic.
They're really affordable options, and this took me all the way from producing my own console gigs to getting paid gigs, which is a really nice thing for me. The one thing I guess that I would add, because Dara made some really good points about microphone quality and about how there are a lot of things that you can do to increase that before you have to upgrade. I also can't iterate how important this boom arm is to me. It is so important, especially as somebody who I do casting both sitting down and standing up. So it really helps me. And Tyler, you've seen my setup. It's a little crazy for
It is. It's a lot of screens,
for just
a lot of moving
casting.
parts.
But I've also been in the industry long enough where I've had the time to invest. So the biggest thing for me is I guess since we've already talked about cameras and mics, is lighting.
Yep.
It's something that a lot of people don't look at when it comes to casting, and with tools that are at your disposal now, things like NVIDIA GeForce and all of the fancy applications you can use with your webcams are all fun and cool, but none of it's going to matter if you can't light yourself properly. Like for instance, I'm currently sitting in a pitch black room, but it doesn't look like I'm sitting in a pitch black room because I have a key light up here on my monitor and another one here that's showing a green tint to accent my background and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of really simple solutions for that. You can find small, decent ring lights at like Target and things like that to start off. Another option that doesn't get talked about a lot in the casting world, because ring lights are kind of just the go-to. Everyone goes, you need lighting, get a ring light. And ring lights are great. My personal opinion, key lights are better. And key lights are these small panels that have LEDs, and you can slide colors in and out of the tops like you would a stage light, and then you can position them how you need around your setup or your room to light things properly. And it gives you a lot of versatility with how you use it. And then on top of that, with casting comes you don't have to do it, but it's going to happen. Content creation, whether that's making your own reel or sharing your clips or what it might be. And so the lighting in that aspect allows you to create extra content to kind of supplement and push things a little bit further.
Yeah.
Those are all very good points. And I, as someone who watches all these things and is always exciting to see updates and improvements, the subtle things make such huge differences. So the quality that brings to that, and if we were going back to like your branding and how you're getting hired for gigs and all that kind of stuff, being able to show that, even if it's just like the bare minimum, is such a huge thing. So I appreciate all those. I definitely agree that those are points that aren't always talked about.
Also a green screen. We talked kind of a little bit about this, and in my opinion, having an ability to have an optional green screen, like above me is a projector roller, and if I need my green screen, I just reach up, grab it, and it'll pull down in front of these shelving units, so that if I'm ever working with a tournament organizer that doesn't want a background that has brands and Funko Pops and things like that they don't want to be shown, you have the option to say, oh, well, I can give you a blank slate, and you can kind of take the wheel with what you want my background to be. A lot of tournament organizers are really thankful for that.
Yeah. I mean, you could be like Jag and Septilence and Waltham that all decide to put themselves in the maps that we are doing that day.
Yeah.
You've done that before. It's a pretty wonderful storytelling option. Appreciate that very much.
Side note, if Septilence is watching, I am working on an interview screen similar to his. I don't know if anybody here has seen his interview screen, but when he goes to interviews, he actually routes his camera through OBS and then to the producer. So he's able to navigate what the background is, and he puts himself into the Jimmy Fallon interview desk. And like, if you look really closely, even on like the mug on the desk, it has the Septilence logo.
That's
it's
all. I've
amazing.
never seen that.
It's amazing. It's honestly a wonder. Everybody should see it. But like, and that gets to the higher end of casting when you get a little bit more experienced with the tools that you're using. You can do some real fun stuff with a green screen.
Very true. Okay, well, we've got about 10 minutes left, and there is still an incredible amount that we could talk about because this is one of the most intense things that I think is most applicable to an individual. But one of the things that I think is probably one of the most difficult areas, especially for a new caster to feel confident in asking and looking for support in, is how you're getting jobs, where you're finding those gigs. And then certainly if you pay attention to esports Twitter, how much you're getting paid for that, if at all, has become a particularly big topic.
Yeah.
So, what I wanted to talk about a little bit is, so like from our side on the producer front, we've adopted the policy. We started out in a situation where everything was volunteer. We had no money to do anything. And certainly the industry was in a very different place back then. We've since adopted the policy that nobody works for us on broadcast without getting paid. So that's not obviously shared, and depending on where you're at in your experience level, that realistically may not be your first opportunity. But given that can be kind of one of those taboo topics to talk about, because one, telling everybody what you get paid is not always the most comfortable conversation. And feeling like you have the power to push back on a producer on getting paid in the first place or what that rate is.
Yeah.
Can you, without getting like too crazy about it, tell a little bit about your experience going from either unpaid to paid gigs, or kind of your experience and how you're dealing with the job hunting aspect of it, as well as some of the advice you would give to someone who is talking to someone either for a contract or a gig that they might be looking at? And again, I know there's a lot of depth to that, so you don't have to go too deep, but just kind of a general overview of your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was gonna open up like talking about this in the context of Smash Bros. So I think like my experience here might be just like a little bit different, because Smash Bros. Is still very much so we don't necessarily have developer support. We don't have a stream of income going in directly. We also have a lot of hesitation from sponsors investing money into the scene. As a result, as it is right now, Smash Bros. Is still extremely grassroots, despite it, numbers-wise being absolutely huge. As a caster, the biggest thing is you can't be going into Smash for money. It's just not going to happen. You can make it work for yourself. You can make it work for yourself by diversifying your sources of income, via streaming, via content creation, commentary, working in production alongside those other things. But as it stands right now, only a very small select handful of people are going to be making a full-time living from Smash. And even then, they have all these different other content ventures. With Smash, the issue is a lot of the tournaments, let's say in person, the venue fees, they go directly to toilets, to paying for like the venue itself, wherever it might be taking place, let's say the store in question, and the rest of the money is being put into the pot. So people are doing it voluntarily, people are doing this knowingly. Then when we go into bigger tournaments, when we do have a little bit more money coming in, casters do end up being paid, but the selection process can be it is very much so often extremely exclusive to like a lot of the same people at times. Online is a little bit of a different environment. For the first time, we're actually seeing, like for even more like weekly events, for casters to be consistently paid. That's new. That's actually, in my experience, that is something completely new. So the way that Corona has actually affected how much you get paid as a caster in this game specifically, I think that's going to be interesting to see as we phase out of it. I don't think it's entirely. I don't think there is a possibility that as the pandemic does start to shift out, there will be less opportunities for casters as there were up until this point. So I'm going to be curious to see how that progresses. But the biggest thing with Smash is like, you got to know a lot of people. You got to talk to a lot of people. You always got to be willing to take on anything that you can do. There isn't a lot to go around. There isn't. But if you can secure yourself like a good footing, and just really try your best to put out a good product, you will be recognized with time. But it's time and energy and a lot of it.
Yeah, very good points. I think the general commentary on esports in general and how organizers deal with budgets and the amount of money in the space or not certainly kind of hits on the reality of what should happen versus what can happen. And that's a really difficult conversation to have, which we will not get into a whole lot today, but certainly appreciate the point. Dryad, you were making a point earlier.
Yeah, so yeah, I pretty much agree with a lot of what Dara said, but there's different things to take into account. First of all, is if you're gonna start casting, if you're interested in the idea, never just do it because you want to live on it. Like you can't really, even that can be your goal, but you can't just have that because it's gonna be very difficult to get there. And obviously, we're all, having the dream that we can get to the higher leagues and be able to make this a full-time job. But you have to take into account that a lot of, if not most of these casters, they have another job or they are in school, they're doing other things. This is not just everything that we do. So that's one thing to take into account when it comes to looking for, better opportunities. You start maybe doing volunteering, you start getting your experience, and you feel like you should be getting paid. There's a lot of people, a lot of casters that are willing to talk about how you should be getting paid, how much you should be getting paid. It comes from people like us who do EGF to maybe people that are in Overwatch contenders. The one over and over again, I've heard them over like willing to talk about the payment and how that should be working. To even Golden Boy, I saw a tweet of him saying like, hey, if you guys need help with this, I can help you, because it's something that is definitely not talked about enough and should be, because then you're not getting what you deserve for casting. So when you're starting out, definitely just expect a little volunteering, but when you have the confidence that you're good enough and people are telling you, then that's when you should be aiming for opportunities that are paid. And that just requires a lot of conversations with other casters as well. Because at the end of the day, and with all the situations that we had recently, what we want to create here is to have better standards for the casting community. And the best way to do it is just talking to other casters. I don't know, it's always been such a taboo to talk about payment, like you say, but in between casters at the end of the day, I don't really see everyone else is working with me as competition. I see them as partners and people that I want to work with, and people that are, we're like all in this together. We're all trying to improve. We're all trying to get to the better league. So the best thing that you can do is be friends with them, talk to them, ask them. And even with those connections, you can get more and more opportunities. It's all about talking to people. It's all about knowing people.
Yeah, the networking aspect of moving up the ladder from the unpaid to the gig to the paid gig realm is really important. And to kind of bridge what Dryad and Dara touched on, don't be afraid to take jobs on the other side of the fence when it comes to esports production. In the past 3 months, I've been lucky enough to get enough gigs where I've been able to support myself and pay rent just off of my casting alone. And the only reason I've been able to do that in every single gig that I have cast is not one that I initially reached out for. It's one that a producer that I worked for, or an observer that I was with, or another caster that I knew was like, hey, this gig is open. There's an opportunity here. I think you'd be good for it. Come and apply. I'll put in a good word for you. And that I can't stress enough. Working with producers as an observer, it not only grows your skill set of what you can bring to the table as somebody within the esports profession. I don't like to say that I'm a caster. I don't like to say that that's what I'm doing for a living. I'm an esports production professional. So I cast, I produce, I observe, all of it around, just because when I go to the table and go to an organization and say, I'd like to work for you, it really reinforces how viable you are. If you go, I'd love to be a caster for you, but I also heard that you're looking for observers. So if I can't fill that role, can I help in another place? And now that organization goes, okay, well, Steidly really wants to help out and wants to be a part of this. Maybe next tournament we're going to have him in that rotation of he can cast for us, or, he can observe for us. And you just have to kind of work your way in with those organizations. And if I'm being completely honest, esports is a small community. When it comes down to it, everybody knows everybody. It takes a while to kind of get those interactions and those introductions sometimes. But for the most part, you get in good with one director, 1 producer, and that's 10 gigs. Another observer, that's another 5 gigs. So the importance of kind of doing the more volunteer positions to get the paid gigs instead of volunteer gigs is what I'm trying to get at. Because in my opinion, if you've just started casting, you may not have the skill set for a paid gig, but there is no reason you shouldn't apply for it. If they give it to you, then it's a trial by fire, and you put your butt on the line. If you make it, you make it, and it's great. That person goes, okay, they're an experienced caster. I want them back again. And if it's not great, then you go, cool. I have a learning experience to go back and look at this VOD. What was it about my casting that didn't want this organization to bring me back? Things like that. So tournament administration, lobby hosting, there's so many different ways to get involved with the community tournaments to build your experience, as well as the paid places to kind of get your foot in the door.
All very good points. Joe, any last thoughts that you'd like to add to this?
I mean, you guys just about covered it. I'll talk a little bit about the traditional side. It is a hard job to get into in terms of casting on the traditional side. I mean, think of it this way: how long have Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels been on Sunday Night Football? They've been. It's been years. Rick Jenneret is the voice of the Buffalo Sabres. He's been doing that for 50 years. So it's a matter of like your window will come eventually for being at the top level, but it is a grind to kind of get there, and it's similar in esports. It's about kind of putting yourself out there first is, I guess, kind of the first step.
Yeah, take the risks, make it happen, follow your dreams. And be ready for reality to sometimes smack you down a little bit. But I will say that the esports community is incredibly supportive. It's generally very positive, and as long as you're not a dick, people tend to respond to that pretty well. So it's something that I'm very proud of. All the people
don't piss anyone off though.
Yeah,
it spreads like wildfire.
Very much so, and I'm certainly makes me very proud of the EGF community, because so far no one has been terrible, and I've never felt like I don't want to spend time with any of you. So I appreciate that. So we're at the end of this. So as we close out for today, I just want to remind everybody that's watching championships this weekend, check us out on Twitch. There's another panel coming up next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. For all of our panelists, their Twitters and some of their shout outs will be in the YouTube description when this goes up there for review. So please make sure you give them all a follow. And as Dara would say on her broadcast, make sure you're drinking water, your posture checked, all that kind of good stuff.
Or you're drinking out of your fancy A&M cup.
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in with us. I had a lot of fun. I hope everybody else did. It's been a beautiful moment to share in this world. So with that, we're going to call it quits and really appreciate everyone and talk to you all soon.
Yeah, this was a blast.